Hello everyone, in this video we're going to talk about animals part 3. The first question is, what are different types of feedings in animals? So the first one we talk about in class is the filter feeders. So the filter feeders are animals such as whale that live in the ocean, and what they do is that they just keep their mouth open, water comes in along with a bunch of nutrients and little small fish, small shrimps, zooplanktons and all that, and they are able to filter out those nutrients and food. And they feed like that. So that's filter feeders. And then obviously carnivores and herbivores, those are very easy. And the next one that we want to talk about is the detritivores. So those are worms, for example, the worms that live in the soil. What they do is that they will take in soil as food, but what they're really eating is that they're absorbing the nutrients that are created by animal and plant decays. So if you think about an animal dies or the leaves fall from a tree, they will decay into the soil, and then the soil becomes very nutrient rich. So these detritivores will eat the decomposed material after plant and animal dies. What's an example of parasitic symbionts? So those are symbiotic relationships, but those are little parasites. So for example, roundworms will be a parasitic symbiont. What are examples of mutualistic symbiont? Those are when two organisms are benefiting each other at the same time. So for example, bacteria living in our stomach, and we're benefiting from the bacteria living in our stomach, and that's a mutualistic relationship. The difference between intracellular digestion and extracellular digestion, we got to see a picture of, let's put it right here, of extracellular, no, intra. So an intracellular digestion means the food is directly digested inside the cell. So rather than having a stomach, the food particles will go inside the cell directly, and then they'll be broken down. So for example, sponges will just take in the food directly into the cell and then break it down. Extracellular digestion is when you actually have a digestive system, such as most animals, such as we have a digestive system, right? So the food will be broken down in the digestive system first before it enters the cell, and then we take in the nutrients. So that's the difference between intracellular, inside the cell directly, food going inside the cell directly, and extracellular digestion, where you go through an extra step where the food will be broken down in the digestive system first. What's the difference between gastrovascular cavities and digestive tract? So gastrovascular cavities is when an animal has a point of entry for food and an exit for the waste, but it's the same opening for both the food and the waste. And digestive tract is what we have, where food is coming in one end of the tube, and then the waste is going out the other end. What characteristic do the respiratory structures of all animals have? So when you think about a respiratory structure, that's our lung for us, or the gills for fish. So what are some differences, and what are some similarities between those two? First off, they both have a very large surface area. So having a lot of surface allow the nutrients, the oxygen mostly, they allow the gas exchange to be more efficient. So a lot of oxygen can enter the bloodstream because there's all those surface taking in the oxygen, and then the carbon dioxide can be eliminated very quickly. They both have to be moist, so right here. So we have a large surface area. Right here. They both have to be moist. So if you think about your lung, it's a very moist environment. And the reason for that is because oxygen can only go into your bloodstream if it's already dissolved in liquid. For fish, it works much better because the oxygen is already in the water, so it's moist, right? The gills are moist. The third one is a selectively permeable membrane. So what that means is that this membrane, this protective layer of structure, the lining of your respiratory tract, the outside of the gill, of each one of those little hair of the gill, those membranes are selectively permeable, which means it only allows certain material to come in and out, and not all the material, right? So why does that matter? As a human, we breathing a lot of things, and we only want the oxygen to enter our bloodstream and nothing else. We only want the carbon dioxide to come out of our bloodstream and go into our lung for us to breathe out. We don't want to be breathing out our red blood cells, for example, right? So this is the importance of these selectively permeable membrane. It only allows certain material to come in and out, so that the whole process can be very efficient and it's not damaging our body. The last one is characteristics Another characteristic of respiratory structure is to maintain different concentrations of oxygen and carbon dioxide on each side of the membrane. So how this works is that if you think about your lung, right, when you breathe in, this lung area has a lot of oxygen, and then the bloodstream right next to the lung does not have a lot of oxygen. So this creates a concentration gradient. Remember, molecules always tend to move from high to low, right? It moves from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. And the only reason that oxygen can enter our bloodstream is because there's more oxygen in the lung than in our bloodstream. And the same idea for carbon dioxide. The only reason we can get rid of carbon dioxide in our body is because there's less carbon dioxide in our lung when we first breathe in, and then there's more carbon dioxide inside the bloodstream, so that the carbon dioxide can go from the bloodstream into the lung and for us to breathe out. Okay, so maintaining this difference in concentration, high on one side of the membrane, low on one side of the membrane for both types of gases, is what allows us to actually breathe in and breathe out and actually transport the oxygen all throughout our body and get rid of carbon dioxide. The next one is, what type of animals use gills to breathe? Fish, marine animals. A lot of the marine animals. What animals use lungs? So those will be the reptiles, amphibians. The amphibians are the skin and lung breather, but they also have a lung. The reptiles only has a lung, and then other mammals have lungs. Okay. The next one is, what is the difference between open and closed circulatory systems? So this is one that I had right here. So we've seen this picture in class before, and let's talk about this closed circulatory system. This is what we have. So we have a heart, and there's a point of exit where there's a little tube leading the blood out of the heart, and then there are a bunch of other tubes eventually leading the blood back to the heart. So what's going to happen is this heart is going to send oxygenated blood, right? This blood already has oxygen, and it sends out to all throughout our body so that oxygen can be transported all throughout our body. And then this blood is also going to pick up carbon dioxide. And this blood is then going to go back to the heart so that it can be refilled with oxygen and it can get rid of carbon dioxide. This is a closed circulatory system because, as you can see, this whole loop is a closed loop. So an open circulatory system is when you do send the body liquid, which is called hemolymph. This is not really blood, but it does the same thing. It sends oxygen all throughout the body. So it does have a heart that pumps so that it can squeeze the oxygenated hemolymph all throughout the body of an insect, for example. However, there's no blood vessels that allow the hemolymph to go back to the heart. What happens is, these are all open ends. So as these hemolymph come out of the heart, it's just going to flow out of these tubes. These are open tubes. And then some of those liquid will go back to the heart. Some of those won't. Eventually, most of those will make it back to the heart, but it's not a closed loop, okay? As you can see, this right here is an open loop. So what you need to do is to be able to identify which one is which, okay? The next one is, what is the function of the excretory system? It's already said here. The excretory system is responsible for the elimination of waste by homeostasis. Okay, next one. What type of neurons do animals use to receive signals? So those are the sensory neurons in our peripheral nervous system. And what systems do animals use to respond to the environment? Those are the motor neurons, which is also a part of peripheral nervous system, but this is what we use to actually, I'm trying to move around right here. I'm using my motor neuron to send signals to my arm, okay? And then when you sense things, I can feel that this room is a certain temperature. That will be your sensory neurons when receiving signals from the environment. The last one, 32, is something that we didn't get to talk about in class, so we'll just leave that. You can take a look at it if you're interested, but this is not going to be on the test. I know you haven't seen Marshy for a while. There he is.